She was 8 years old when her world collapsed. Her brother taken by their father, her sister taken by their mother, and no one chose her. Abandoned to the foster system, Goldie grew up invisible, carrying scars her family never saw. Now, decades later, the ghosts of her past return. A sick father, a brother reaching out, a sister desperate to reconnect. But Goldie has her own terms: truth, accountability, and no more silence. In a story of survival and reckoning, she must decide if facing them will reopen old wounds or finally set her free. My name is Goldie, and if you walked into my gallery in downtown Chicago today, you'd probably see me as the confident owner greeting visitors, arranging canvases, and championing young artists who are just beginning their journey. At 32, I've built a life that feels stable, vibrant, and meaningful. But when I look at the walls covered with paintings, I can't help but remember another set of walls, those of a modest brick ranch house in suburban Chicago, where my story began. A house that once held the laughter of 3 children, the smell of Sunday pancakes, and the illusion of a family that would last forever. Back then, our lives looked picture perfect from the outside. We had the tire swing in the backyard, a golden retriever named Rusty, and summer trips to Lake Michigan, where we'd come home sunburned, sandy, and happy. My dad, Jack, was a construction contractor. He was the kind of father who smelled of sawdust and mint gum, who could scoop you up in his rough, calloused hands and make you feel safe in an instant. My mom, Diane, was a part-time nurse with an infectious laugh that shook her whole body. At night, she'd let me brush out her hair, 100 strokes just like the princesses in my storybooks. I was the middle child, between my older brother Noah and my little sister Sophie. Noah was 10 then, my hero. The one who ran beside me until I learned to ride a bike and who cheered the loudest when I finally did. He collected baseball cards and taught me the stats of every Chicago Cubs player, even when I didn't really understand them. Sophie was 6, a little shadow who followed me everywhere. She clutched a stuffed elephant with one floppy ear, and at night I read her stories in different voices until she drifted to sleep. Our house wasn't fancy, but it was ours. My bedroom ceiling was covered in glow-in-the-dark stars. The kitchen had yellow curtains Mom had sewn herself. And the dining table was mismatched. Dad had rescued old chairs from job sites and refinished them, turning scraps into something whole. Sundays were sacred. Dad flipped perfect golden pancakes at the stove, while Mom sliced fruit. Noah would sneak chocolate chips into the batter when Dad wasn't looking, and Sophie would giggle uncontrollably as if she were in on the world's greatest secret. My job was to set the table, carefully placing forks and knives like it was a royal banquet. After breakfast, we'd pile into the car and head for the lake, where Dad taught us to swim past the breaking waves and Mom read paperbacks under her umbrella. At night, we'd watch the sky bleed pink and purple while eating ice cream that dripped down our wrists. I believed that was life, that this was what family meant. A galaxy of glow-in-the-dark stars above me at night, a golden retriever at my feet, and parents who kissed our foreheads before school. Looking back now, I can see the cracks that had already started forming, faint hairlines beneath the glossy surface of our family. The way Dad's work seemed to boom one month and vanish the next. The tightness around Mom's smile when bills came in the mail. But at 8 years old, I didn't notice those fractures. All I knew was that I had a brother who protected me, a sister who adored me, and parents who tucked us in at night. That illusion shattered quickly. I didn't know that the glow-in-the-dark stars on my ceiling would be the last safe galaxy I'd stare at before my world collapsed. I didn't know that the parents who brushed my hair and kissed my forehead would soon make a choice that would define my entire life. My dad would take my brother. My mom would take my sister. And no one would take me. I was 8 years old when my family decided I didn't belong to anyone. The night my childhood ended wasn't marked by some dramatic storm or flashing sirens. It was marked by words I wasn't supposed to hear. I was sitting on the top step of the staircase, knees pulled to my chest, listening to the low rumble of my parents' voices downstairs. At first, I thought it was just another argument about money. I had learned to recognize the cadence. Dad's voice defensive and sharp, Mom's voice cutting, tired, brittle from too many double shifts. But then I heard something different. "Who goes where?" my mom said flatly, like she was dividing up furniture, not children. My chest tightened. "Noah should come with me," Dad answered without hesitation. "He needs a man around. He's at that age." My heart pounded. "Fine." "Sophie stays with me," Mom replied quickly. "She's too little. She needs her mother." There was a silence then, a silence where my name should have been spoken, a silence that was louder than any yelling. I sat frozen, my breath held, waiting for one of them to say Goldie, waiting for someone to fight for me. But they didn't. The conversation shifted to bank accounts and visitation schedules, as if I didn't exist. At 8 years old, I learned what it meant to be invisible. The days after that felt surreal, like I was living in a dream where nothing made sense. Dad and Noah packed bags one morning. Dad told me they were going on a trip, but even then I knew better. Noah hugged me tightly, whispering, "I'll call you soon, I promise," but his voice shook like he already knew he couldn't keep that promise. Then the door closed behind them, and the house felt instantly smaller. Mom didn't come out of her room for 2 days after they left. She let me make cereal for Sophie and myself, let me read bedtime stories, let me tuck Sophie in when she cried asking for Dad. I kept thinking she'd come out and explain things, tell us this was temporary, tell me she hadn't forgotten me. But on the 3rd day she emerged with suitcases. "This isn't forever," she said, not meeting my eyes as she packed Sophie's things. "We just need a fresh start. I'll come back for you when things settle down." The words sliced through me. My throat closed, panic burning in my chest. "What about me?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Why can't I come?" Her hands froze on the zipper of Sophie's bag, then she forced a smile. "Goldie, you need to stay here, in case your father comes back." Even at 8, I knew it was a lie. Sophie cried as Mom carried her to the car. Her little arms reached for me. "Why can't Goldie come?" she sobbed. I had no answer, only tears sliding silently down my face. And then, just like that, they were gone. The sound of the car fading down the street was the loneliest sound I've ever heard. That first night alone, I tried to pretend it was an adventure. I ate ice cream for dinner because no one was there to stop me. I jumped on my parents' bed, watched cartoons, way past bedtime. Rusty, our golden retriever, curled up against me like he sensed I needed protection. But when the house grew quiet and the shadows stretched long across the walls, fear crept in. I turned on every light in the house and still lay awake, straining to hear footsteps that never came. The 2nd day was worse. The milk had spoiled. Rusty barked restlessly, hungry. I gave him half a box of crackers and slices of cheese from the fridge, not knowing what dogs really needed. My stomach knotted, but not just from hunger. It was the weight of realization. Nobody was coming back. On the 4th day, a knock at the door startled me so much I almost screamed. I opened it to see Mrs. Garcia from next door. She took one look at me. My messy hair, Rusty whining behind me, the empty cereal boxes on the counter, and her face changed. "Where are your parents, Misha?" she asked gently. That was the moment the dam broke. I sobbed out the truth. Dad took Noah, Mom took Sophie, and nobody took me. By that evening, a social worker was sitting in Mrs. Garcia's living room, explaining to me in calm, practiced tones that I couldn't stay in the empty house, that they'd find a safe place for me. I clutched my stuffed bear, Howard, and asked when my mom was coming back. Miss Reynolds, the social worker, didn't answer directly. She just gave me a sad look that told me everything I needed to know. The shocking accusation wasn't just that my parents were splitting up. It wasn't even that they divided the kids. It was that in the math of their marriage, I didn't count. I was the remainder. The one they forgot to carry over. The child neither of them chose. That realization, at 8 years old, shattered me more than any argument or slammed door ever could. When I was little, Sophie was the perfect child in everyone's eyes. She was the youngest, the sweet one, the baby with golden curls and wide blue eyes who clutched her stuffed elephant like it was treasure. To Mom, she was precious beyond words, the child who needed shielding, the one whose tears could stop an argument in its tracks. But perfection is heavy, especially when it's handed to a child too young to understand it. And as years passed, that perfect image began to crack. The first time Sophie called me, after Noah reconnected with me, she was a grown woman, a teacher shaping young lives. But on the phone, her voice carried the same breathless urgency of the 6-year-old who once clung to my leg. "I never forgot you," she said within minutes, already crying. "I had this picture of us for my birthday. I hid it in my pillowcase because Mom got upset when she saw it. But I looked at it every night, for years." Her words landed like a stone in my chest. For decades, I'd imagined my siblings living perfect lives, untouched by what broke me. Now here was Sophie telling me she'd been carrying a piece of me all along. But then came the cracks. "I thought you were with Grandma," she admitted softly. "That's what Mom told me. For years I believed you were safe, that you were loved." I closed my eyes, my hand gripping the phone. "No, Soph. I was in the system, alone." The silence that followed stretched heavy between us. It wasn't Sophie's fault, but hearing her words tore open an old wound. They got to live under comforting lies while I lived under fluorescent lights in overcrowded foster homes. When I finally visited her in Columbus months later, she tried to bridge the gap with enthusiasm, planning outings, showing me photo albums. But cracks kept surfacing. I saw her flinch when I described the Jacksons locking up food, or when I confessed that my only possession had been a garbage bag of clothes. "You can't just say things like that," she whispered once, eyes glossy. "Why not?" I shot back. "That's what happened." It became clear the perfect sister had built her own fragile shell, one that couldn't withstand the ugly truths I carried. Around that time, I visited Grandma, the only grandparent still alive. She was in her 80s, frail but sharp. When she saw me, she cupped my face in her wrinkled hands and sighed. "You have your mother's eyes, but stronger." Over tea at her kitchen table, she finally spoke the words no one else dared to. "Your parents failed you," she said bluntly. "They were drowning, and instead of clinging to each other, they dropped you. But child, you swam." Her candor cut deeper than any apology. "What am I supposed to do with them now?" I asked, frustration spilling out. "They want me at this reunion like we can pretend none of it happened." Grandma leaned back, her gaze steady. "You don't owe them peace. But you owe yourself freedom. Don't let their mistakes chain you. Decide what justice looks like for you." That night, lying awake in her guest room, I drafted what I later called Operation Consequence. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't forgiveness. It was truth. If my family wanted me back in their orbit, they would have to hear what it cost me. No sugarcoating, no glossed over excuses. I started compiling everything. The nights I went to bed hungry. The words foster parents used to cut me down. The birthdays spent alone, wishing for a card that never came. The names of every house, every year, every scar. It was meticulous, almost clinical, a record not just of suffering, but of survival. Zoe called it therapy on paper. Michael called it evidence. To me, it was a weapon and a shield. I wasn't that 8-year-old girl anymore, waiting at the window for headlights that never appeared. I was a grown woman who could set terms. If they wanted me, they would get me unfiltered. Sophie, of course, wanted none of it. During one call, when I mentioned what I was preparing, she begged me to let it go. "Can't we just start fresh? Why do you have to drag the past into this?" "Because the past is what made me," I snapped. "You have the luxury of forgetting. I didn't." Her sobs came through the line, and for a moment I almost softened. But then I remembered the countless nights in strange beds, crying into a pillow with no one to hear me. Operation Consequence wasn't just for them. It was for me, for the girl who had been left behind. Grandma's words echoed in my head as I finished writing. "Decide what justice looks like for you." For me, justice wasn't about punishing them. It was about making them see. The perfect sister was cracking. The parents were finally reaching out. The brother was playing mediator. And I, the forgotten child, was about to set the rules of engagement. The message came on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I was sitting in my gallery office, sipping coffee, reviewing artist submissions when my phone buzzed. The notification seemed harmless enough until I saw the name. Noah. 24 years had passed since the morning he walked out the door with Dad, leaving me standing in the living room in my pajamas. My coffee cup slipped from my hand, shattering against the hardwood floor. The message was short, almost too simple for the weight it carried. "Goldie, it's Noah. I don't know if you remember me, but I found your gallery online. Can we talk?" I sat frozen, staring at those words as though they were written in a language I no longer understood. My assistant peeked in after hearing the crash, but I waved her off. My whole body was locked in that moment. Half a woman in Chicago, half an 8-year-old abandoned child. 2 days passed before I found the courage to respond. 2 days of therapy sessions, late-night talks with Michael, endless pacing around my condo. Finally, I typed, "I remember you. We can talk." His reply was immediate. He gave me his number. I called. The voice on the other end was deeper, steadier, but carried the same pauses Noah always had when saying something important. "I can't believe it's you," he said, thick with emotion. "I've been searching for years." My throat closed. "Why now?" He hesitated. "Dad's sick. Really sick. He wants to make peace. And Sophie's been looking for you too. She never stopped talking about you." I gripped the phone, fury surging up like a wave. Now they wanted me? After years of silence? In the weeks that followed, Noah and I spoke more. He told me about his life in Wisconsin, about his kids, about how Dad had never wanted us contacting each other because clean breaks were better. Sophie called soon after, her voice bright, trembling with tears. "I never forgot you," she said. "I prayed every night you'd come back." Her words hit hard, but so did her ignorance. She admitted Mom told her I was with Grandma for years. By the time she learned the truth, that I'd been in foster care, no one seemed to know where I was. Every conversation chipped away at the distance but fueled a new storm inside me. They wanted closeness, but all I had were scars. The real blow came when Noah mentioned the reunion. "Dad's turning 60. With his health the way it is, we thought it was time to get everyone together. We want you there, Goldie." I laughed bitterly. "You want me to play baby sister again? Sit around the lake house like 20 years didn't happen?" "No," he said softly. "We want you to come as you are. We want to make things right." Make things right. The phrase rang hollow. I'd survived more than a decade in foster care, packed my life in garbage bags, cried myself to sleep in houses that didn't want me. There was no making that right. Still, I agreed to see them, on my terms. I began preparing for what I called the confrontation setup. No lake house, no nostalgia, no pretending. Instead, I chose a restaurant in Chicago, not far from my gallery, neutral territory, a place where I felt grounded. I wrote letters to each of them ahead of time. No pleasantries, no sugarcoating, just the truth. I detailed what happened to me after they left. The Thompsons with their basement couch. The Ramirezes with military rules. The Williams with their cutting insults. The Jacksons who locked the fridge. I wrote about the birthdays spent alone, the hunger, the loneliness, the way I stopped believing anyone would ever come for me. I made it clear, if they wanted me in their lives, they needed to face the reality of what I had endured. Sophie called after reading her letter, sobbing. "Goldie, please don't bring all this up at dinner. Can't we just move forward?" Her words cracked something in me. "You had the luxury of forgetting," I told her. "I didn't. If you want me now, you get all of me, even the parts that hurt." She was quiet after that, and for the first time, I sensed she understood. Michael offered to come with me as support. Zoe threatened to camp outside the restaurant in case I needed backup. But in the end, I knew I had to walk into that room alone, not as the forgotten child begging to be seen, but as a woman who had rebuilt herself from nothing, ready to confront the ghosts who had returned, asking for forgiveness I wasn't sure I owed. The stage was set. The day I agreed to meet Noah felt unreal, like watching a movie I'd already seen 100 times but with a different ending. He was in Chicago for a work conference, and instead of the restaurant setup I had in mind for the family dinner, he suggested we grab coffee, just the two of us. I chose a busy cafe downtown, one of those places with exposed brick walls and mismatched chairs, where the sound of milk steamers and clinking cups created a kind of buffer. I needed the noise, the people, the hum of normal life around us. Silence, I'd learned, was too dangerous. I arrived early, deliberately choosing a table near the window. My palms were damp. My chest ached with a strange mix of anticipation and dread. When the door finally opened and Noah stepped inside, I almost didn't recognize him. He was taller than I remembered, broader, his face carrying lines of adulthood, but his gait, hesitant, careful, was pure Dad. My stomach twisted. He spotted me quickly, hesitated, then crossed the room. "Goldie," he said softly, almost like a question. I forced myself to stand. Our hug was brief, awkward, two strangers in the bodies of siblings. The first few minutes were small talk. His kids, my gallery, weather, work. The kind of conversation you'd have with someone you met at an office mixer, not your brother who'd once taught you to ride a bike. Finally, I leaned forward, my voice low but sharp. "Why didn't you call me back?" His brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I called Dad's phone after you left. Over and over. I left messages. Begged him to let me talk to you." Once, a woman answered. She promised she'd tell him I called. Did she? Did you ever get those messages? Color drained from his face. He shook his head slowly. Goldie, I swear, I never knew. Dad, he told me it would be better if we didn't contact you. That you were fine. Fine? My laugh came out bitter, too loud for the quiet cafe corner. A couple of customers glanced our way. I was 8 years old, Noah. Alone in that house for days. Do you know what it's like to feed your dog crackers because you don't know how else to keep him alive? Do you know what it's like to pack your life in garbage bags because foster homes don't give kids closets? His hands trembled around his coffee cup. I didn't know, he whispered. I swear I didn't know. We sat in silence for a long moment. I could feel the wall between us. The years, the choices, the silence, all stacked like bricks. Finally, he said, I kept thinking you were with Mom or with Grandma. That's what Dad told me. And by the time I realized, it was too late. I was a kid too, Goldie. I didn't know how to fight him. The words pierced something in me. For so long, I'd held Noah in my mind as someone who'd chosen Dad over me. Now I saw the boy he'd been. 10 years old, swept into a life he hadn't asked for, manipulated by a man drowning in pride and alcohol. But sympathy and anger wrestled inside me. You still had him, I said finally. You had baseball games and a roof and someone checking if you ate dinner. I had the Williams telling me I was worthless. I had the Jacksons locking up the fridge. Don't tell me it was the same. His eyes filled. You're right, he said. It wasn't the same. You suffered more than I can ever understand. And I hate myself for not being there. For the first time, I let myself really look at him, not just as the brother who left, but as a man carrying his own scars. The shame in his eyes wasn't performative. It was raw, jagged. Why now, I asked again, softer this time. Because Dad's dying, he admitted, and because Sophie never stopped asking about you. She has a picture of you two by her bed, even now. Goldie, we've all been waiting to see you again. I shook my head. No, you've been waiting for me to forget, waiting until guilt outweighed convenience. His jaw clenched, but he didn't argue. Instead, he reached into his wallet and pulled out a creased card. He slid it across the table. It was a birthday card, my name written in Noah's messy handwriting, the same one I'd received years ago, forwarded late, worn thin from being held under my pillow. I wrote you every year, he said quietly. Most came back marked, returned to sender, but I never stopped. My throat tightened. For the first time in years, I couldn't speak. That coffee shop didn't give me back my childhood or erase the years of abandonment, but it gave me something I hadn't expected, a crack in the narrative I'd carried. Maybe Noah hadn't chosen Dad over me. Maybe he'd been a kid too, trapped in a different kind of cage. And as much as it hurt, I realized this showdown wasn't about destroying him with my truth. It was about deciding if I could let him step into my present without dragging me back to the past. The family dinner was supposed to be neutral. That was my one condition. No lake house, no sentimental setting, just a quiet restaurant in Chicago where I felt grounded and in control. But the moment they walked in, Dad, frailer than I remembered, Mom fidgeting with her necklace, Sophie's eyes scanning the room until they locked on mine, I felt the air tighten, my chest constricted, as if I were 8 years old again, waiting to be picked, waiting to belong. We sat, exchanged awkward hugs, and stumbled through small talk. But it didn't take long for Dad to clear his throat and say what I knew was coming. Goldie, we owe you an apology. We failed you. What happened? What we did, there's no excuse. Mom jumped in quickly, her voice trembling. We were drowning, sweetheart. I was depressed. Your father was drinking too much. We thought we were making the best decision. I should have. I cut her off, my voice sharper than I intended. The best decision for who? Because it sure wasn't for me. The table went silent. Sophie stared at her hands. Noah shifted uncomfortably. Dad's jaw worked like he was chewing on words he couldn't swallow. I pulled a folded paper from my bag, one of the letters I'd written as part of Operation Consequence. I hadn't planned on reading it aloud, but the weight of their half-excuses demanded something stronger than polite responses. This is what happened to me, I said, laying the paper flat. My voice trembled at first, but steadied as I went on. July 2002. The Thompsons decided they didn't want me anymore. They sent me back with my belongings in a garbage bag. March 2004. Mrs. Williams told me I was too stupid to ever amount to anything because I got a B-. November 2005. The Jacksons locked their refrigerator for an entire weekend as punishment for eating too much at Thanksgiving. I lifted my eyes from the page, meeting theirs one by one. This is the life you gave me. You call it a mistake. I call it survival. Mom started crying silently, her tears falling onto the linen tablecloth. Dad looked away, ashamed, or maybe just angry at being forced to confront it. We tried, he muttered. We called the social worker. They told us you were in a good home, that we'd just make things harder if we disrupted it. My laugh was harsh, humorless. A good home? Do you have any idea how many times I moved? How many good homes I survived? You believed the story because it was easier than facing the truth, and because it was convenient. Noah finally spoke, his voice steady but strained. Goldie, they're here now. Isn't that worth something? Only if we're honest, I replied. Only if you all accept that you left me, that you didn't come back. Not because it was complicated, but because it was easier not to. The pressure in that room was suffocating. For a moment, I thought about walking out, leaving them with their guilt and their apologies. But then I remembered Grandma's words. Decide what justice looks like for you. So I took a deep breath and did something I never thought I'd do. I laid down rules. If there's going to be any relationship between us, it happens on my terms, I said firmly. No instant family reunions. No pretending 2 decades didn't happen. No dragging me into holiday dinners or family portraits like I'm a missing puzzle piece, finally slotted back into place. Mom wiped her tears, whispering, What do you want from us then? I want acknowledgement. I want truth. And I want space. My voice softened, but my resolve didn't waver. If you want to know me now, you meet me as the woman I've become, not the child you abandoned. Sophie reached across the table then, her hand stopping just short of mine. Her eyes brimmed with tears. I don't want to pretend. I just want my sister back, however you'll let me have her. That broke me a little, but it also strengthened me. Because for the first time, I realized I wasn't powerless. I wasn't the child waiting to be chosen. I was the one setting the terms. By the end of the night, no one left satisfied. Mom cried until her mascara streaked. Dad muttered something about doing his best. Noah looked exhausted. Sophie whispered she'd call me later. But I walked out lighter. Because for the first time in my life, I hadn't begged for their love. I hadn't tried to fit myself into their fractured narrative. I'd signed my own terms. Under pressure, yes, but on my terms nonetheless. And that changed everything. Walking out of that restaurant, the night air felt sharp, almost electric against my skin. Chicago traffic hummed around me, headlights streaking past, people laughing on sidewalks. Life moved on, indifferent to the fact that I had just faced the ghosts of my past. For years, I had imagined what it would be like if my family came back. As a child, I pictured hugs, apologies, maybe even a return to the house with yellow curtains and glow-in-the-dark stars. As an adult, I thought I'd meet their regret with rage, maybe forgiveness, maybe both. But the reality was quieter, heavier. They didn't give me closure. They gave me confirmation. Confirmation that what happened wasn't a nightmare I'd exaggerated. It was real, and it was theirs to carry as much as it was mine. The weeks after that dinner were strange. Sophie called almost immediately. Can we get coffee, just us? She asked. And we did. Without our parents there, she seemed freer, less defensive. She admitted how confusing her childhood had been, how Mom spun lies to protect her, how their stepfather never fully understood the weight Sophie carried. She confessed that she sometimes sabotaged her own relationships, afraid of being left the way we had left each other. We weren't suddenly best friends, but sitting across from her, I realized we were both fractured in our own ways. And maybe, slowly, we could build something new. Not as perfect sisters from a lost childhood, but as two women choosing each other now. Noah was different. He wanted steady contact, updates about my life, calls where his kid shouted, "Hi, Aunt Goldie," through the phone. Part of me softened when I heard their laughter, but part of me flinched too. How could I be Aunt Goldie when I'd never even been a daughter or a sister in the way I should have? I told him I'd try, but I wouldn't force something I wasn't ready for. Mom sent me a package a week later. Inside was Howard, the teddy bear I thought I lost forever. His fur was worn, one eye a little loose, but he smelled faintly of lavender, like her. The note read, "I should have kept you safe, Goldie. I am so sorry." I put Howard on a shelf in my bedroom, not as forgiveness, not as reconciliation, but as acknowledgement, a reminder of the child I had been and the woman I had become. Dad's call came months later. His voice was weaker, his breath shorter. "I failed you," he said simply. "Not just when you were 8, but every day after, when I could have tried and didn't. I can't change it, but I know it now." It wasn't a plea. It wasn't even really an apology. It was truth. And somehow, that mattered more than 1,000 excuses. I'll never be the daughter my parents wanted to remember. I'll never be the sister frozen in childhood innocence. But I am Goldie, the woman who turned abandonment into independence, pain into art, silence into truth. And that's enough. The experience ignited something in my art. I began a series of pieces called Fragments and Foundations. Abstract canvases layered with broken shapes and raw textures, stitched together with bold lines of color. They weren't pretty, they weren't neat, but critics called them haunting, resilient, brutally honest. For me, they weren't just paintings, they were exorcisms. Each brushstroke was a piece of the foster homes, the empty house, the social workers who barely remembered my name. Each layer of paint was me reclaiming the story. When the exhibition opened, I stood in the gallery surrounded by people murmuring about my work. Reviewers scribbled notes. Collectors whispered about price tags. But all I felt was release. My pain had become art. My survival had become beauty. People often ask me now, did you forgive them? Here's the truth. Forgiveness for me isn't about excusing what happened. It's not about saying it was okay or erasing the scars. Forgiveness is about letting go of the weight I carried, so it no longer defined me. I forgave them, not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. But reconciliation? That's different. That's not mine to give alone. That requires effort, consistency, honesty. And I made it clear, if they want a place in my life, they come in slowly, carefully, respecting the boundaries I fought so hard to build. Family, I've learned, isn't about blood. Blood gave me abandonment. Choice gave me love. Zoe, who dragged me to her family's chaotic Thanksgivings. Michael, who never pushed but always stood steady beside me. Grandma, who told me the truth when no one else would. Friends who show up. Colleagues who cheer. Artists who trust me with their work. That's my family. Now, in my gallery office, 2 photos hang side by side. One is Sophie's hidden picture. A gap-toothed 8-year-old girl, eyes full of hope she didn't know would be crushed. The other is a self-portrait I painted last year, a woman with shoulders squared, gaze steady, no longer invisible. Both are me, both are true, both deserve to be seen. Goldie's journey is not just about abandonment, it's about transformation. What happened to her at 8 years old could have broken her permanently. Instead, it reshaped her. She endured neglect, survived the foster care system, and faced the crushing silence of parents who chose convenience over courage. But here's the deeper message. Family isn't defined by blood, it's defined by presence. Goldie discovered that resilience is built in the moments when no one shows up for you, and that healing begins when you learn to show up for yourself. She learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means releasing the burden of anger, not for the people who hurt you, but for your own peace of mind. Her art became her voice, turning pain into power. Her chosen family, friends, mentors, and loved ones who stood by her, proved that loyalty, consistency, and love mean more than DNA. This story challenges us to rethink what family really means. Is it the people we're born to, or is it the people who choose us every single day? Goldie's life reminds us that we can survive being broken, and we can rebuild stronger, wiser, and freer than ever before. If this story hits you in the heart, don't just leave quietly. Hit that like button, drop a comment below, and share this video with someone who needs to hear that they're not alone. Tell me, have you ever had to redefine what family means to you? Do you believe forgiveness is possible without forgetting? I read every comment, and your words could help someone else heal. And don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. It's about a son who walked away from his wealthy family, only to discover the shocking truth they've been hiding for decades. This is Twisted Family Revenge, where we uncover the stories that shake us, break us, and ultimately remind us of what it means to be human.